First up, we got CJ Cornthwaite, Christianity's Dirty Secret. Why conservatives lose their faith in seminary. Oh, wait, I was watching some of this. Sorry, hang on.
Christianity has a dirty little secret. And do you know what it is? Actually, probably has a lot of dirty little secrets. But one of the ones I want to talk about today is the dirty little secret that a lot of pastors, ministers, etc., lose their faith when they go to seminary. And I want to talk a little bit about why this is. And I think part of this is prompted due to a lot of comments that I've gotten on my channel geared at my education, because I often start videos by saying I have a Master of Divinity, which is the formal degree you get to go be a minister. I have a Master of Arts in Theology that I did after that, and I have a PhD in Christian origins. So, by the way, this is a good spot to say, if you haven't already done so, do subscribe. But what happens is I get so many comments from people who are like, all that education and you still don't know the truth, or, you know, you have a PhD, but you don't believe the Bible, or you don't believe the truth, you don't believe what I believe. And I think it's ironic as I think about the process of educating people and what education is actually for. I've thought a lot about this. I think it's one of the most interesting things in Christianity that we don't really talk about. That when people are in churches, the leaders who go to get trained to lead those churches often find themselves in a position where they have to leave. That's wild. Like, stop and think about that. Think about the fact that somebody will go off to seminary and end up completely leaving the religion instead of coming back and leading the community they had intended to lead. And I think from the other side, like for somebody who doesn't know what's happening in that seminary, you kind of make up stories. And the two most common stories that I hear is that you somehow got tricked by liberal professors. This is really common, that like you went and listened to liberals and got totally tricked, and that's why you now believe liberal things and why you're not a Christian anymore. And I think this is just an incredibly stupid argument. Like, if you actually believe that somebody will have a career in mind, feel like they are called by God, go off to seminary, and just be susceptible to brainwashing after all of that call and all of that like excitement they had for doing the calling, they picked a career, they went off and got brainwashed by professors. Like, that's stupid. If you want to believe that, you can, but that's ridiculous. That's absolutely.
It's not that ridiculous, but it's not even that. I don't even think they're getting brainwashed. I think what happens is they come from a poor background that doesn't teach them, doesn't properly ground them in the faith, and then when they go to the seminary, it's just giving them more of that stuff. So, or even worse, right? It's like really like giving them the liberal view of it, right? So then, without the proper grounding originally, they don't have any reason to stay with it. Then they get deconstructed. That's what happens.
Absolutely ridiculous. A lot of people fall back on the trustworthy old, well, they were never really saved, they were never really Christian. This also seems kind of stupid. I mean, I don't really know why people are so obsessed with saying this. Well, okay, actually, I do, because instead of saying they went off to seminary and learned something so damaging to their faith or their beliefs that they couldn't, in good conscience, come back and lead us, I'm still in this community if I'm this person. So it's easier to say, well, they were never really one of us to begin with. And then all of this conversation goes along with this idea that biblical scholars are biased, because I see this a lot too, and it's, in my comments. Maybe I should stop reading the comments, but I like reading comments. But I see a lot of people say like, well, biblical scholars are biased against the truth, that like you somehow have this, again, often liberal, but like Bible scholars don't actually believe the truth. They're just out to get you. When I was a teenager, the movie God's Not Dead came out, and it sort of, I think, serves as a really important commentary on what evangelicals think about education. They think that you go in and an atheist philosophy professor is out to get you and destroy your faith, probably because they are angry at God. Maybe God did something. They're mad at God. And they just have all these unworked father figure resentment issues with God, and they need to work through that, and maybe they get saved at the end. I think it's a really oversimplistic movie and parable, but I think it is a true expression of a certain type of way that a certain type of Christian thinks about education. And it's worth stopping to think about this, not just because people leave the faith or would-be Christian leaders leave the faith, which is an important question. Let's put a pin in that for a minute. But probably the big question that comes from all this is, why does a certain type of conservative evangelicalism see itself as fundamentally at war with education? And you see this.
We're not at war with education. Christianity is what produced the education system that we have in the West today. But we're at war with this type of deconstruction type of education, where he's trying to basically deconstruct people's faith. That's what he's trying to do here. You know, he's trying to tell you that education opposes what the Bible says. Therefore, if you believe in education, you can't believe the Bible. You know, when nothing could be further from the truth. But these people, they just accept all these things that are against the Bible. They just accept it. They just believe it. Well, obviously, the university system is secular and the Bible is not. So that's a problem for people who believe the Bible. You know, of course it's going to be.
in, you know, famous like people trying to get school boards to teach creationism alongside of evolution. You see it in the assault of biblical criticism or good history.
Yeah, yeah. Why should they teach creationism beside evolutionism? Evolutionism is another religion, but these people, they think it's just like, he didn't even like try to discuss their arguments or why they think people should do that, right? He just dismissed it. It's like the very idea that they suggested that they could teach creationism beside evolutionism. That's just ridiculous, right? He doesn't even address any of their other claims about it or anything. Yeah. Anyway,
History that apologists launch. You see it as
what?
this criticism or good history that apologists side of evolution. You see it in the assault of biblical criticism or good history that apologists launch. You see it as
Biblical criticism is good history now, right? This is what he's trying to get you to think, that if you're critical of the Bible, then that's good history, you know? But actually what happens is they'll these critical historians, right? They always try to come and say the Bible's wrong, the Bible's wrong, the Bible's wrong. But then what ends up happening is the Bible gets proven right again and again. Again and again and again. Okay, it's unbelievable how often this happens. Like in the New Testament they have these things like these, like there's this thing called the pool of Siloam in John chapter 9, I think, and then there's like this other thing like the pool of Bethesda, right? They found those, you know, but the people before they found them, people were saying, "Oh, it's just some stupid Bible thing that's just made up." And then they found it, and then now they have to take it back, you know? This is what happens with these people, man. He's trying to tell you that, oh, critical history is, oh, that's good history. And that what does he say?
war with education. And you see this in, you know, famous like people trying to get school boards to teach creationism alongside of evolution. You see it in the assault of biblical criticism or good history that apologists launch.
Yeah. Like, what am I? No, it's not good history. Good history is just good history. It doesn't have anything to do with biblical criticism. If biblical criticism produces good history, then okay, that's good. But that hasn't happened yet. That has not happened yet, even once. And so what they do is they produce this history that ends up getting disproven by the Bible. Okay, again and again and again. I'm telling you.
See it as this sort of battle of worldviews that a lot of people think they are in between Christian apologists and atheists, secular humanists, postmodernists, relativists. Fill in the blank with your favorite category of evil person that a conservative Christian often thinks they are out to war against, to fight against. But I think one.
No, we're not fighting against them. We're just saying that those ways of seeing the world are ignorant, false, wrong, morally indefensible, and other problems with it. That's what we're saying. We're not trying to villainize them. I don't hate them. I'm not trying to demonize them. I'm just saying that like let's say postmodernism, right? Postmodernism tries to get you to think that the truth is subjective. That your particular perspective on the truth is going to be different than mine. So therefore we have different truths, and that my truth is no better than your truth. Well, no, that's completely stupid. There's one truth, and if your perspective is not allowing you to see it, and my perspective allows me to see it, then I'm right, you know. And if it's the other way, then you're right. Okay, that's how it is. There's no multiple different truths, right? So that's what we're saying. We're saying that's a ridiculous way of seeing the world. It's utterly stupid. Okay, the Bible is obviously dead set against it because the Bible is true. That's what we're saying. You know, there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong. That's our position. If you have a different position, okay, argue it. But don't act like we're just like religious idiots. We have a point. We have a full philosophical defense for our view. Ridiculous.
person that a conservative Christian often thinks they are out to war against, to fight against. But I think one of the simplest ways to understand this is that conservative evangelicalism, I use the word fundamentalism, I know these are problematic terms, but I think one of the easiest ways to understand this is that these movements are fundamentally pushbacks to modernity. These movements emerged in the 20th century as a pushback to modernity, as a pushback to education, fundamentalism.
No, they're not a pushback against education or modernity. I mean, modernity, modernism, yes, not modernity. Modernity is just that is what we live in. That's modernity. We live in modernity. What they're pushing against is modernism, which is a philosophical view that the modern is somehow morally superior to something in the ancient past or whatever. You know, that's one problem with it. The other thing that they were pushing back against, like what now became fundamentalists or whatever he's talking about, conservative evangelicals, is like liberalism, liberal theology. Okay, the idea that the Bible is not necessarily the source of truth, that there may be some doubt there, or that we don't necessarily have to believe everything in the Bible. You know, that's what we're pushing against here. That's what the fundamentalists, conservative evangelicals, that's what they were pushing against. Okay, not modernity. That's utterly dumb. So just because people have PhDs and stuff doesn't mean that they know what they're talking about or that they're saying the truth. Okay, a lot of times they say this dumb stuff like this. We're not against modernity. We're against modernism, which is like kind of like I'm not against science, but I'm against scientism, right? And everybody knows the difference. He knows the difference too. If he has a PhD, he absolutely knows the difference between those terms, but he's trying to mix it up because he's just being ignorant. He's trying to deconstruct people's faith. That's all he's doing.
Century
Hey,
as a
Crafty Val,
pushback
how are
to
you?
modernity, as a pushback to education. Fundamentalism is a pushback to this, and I've often said that
No,
when you look
fundamentalism is not a pushback against education. Now, I don't support fundamentalism either. Okay, and we've talked about how fundamentalism is not a grassroots thing, that it was pushed onto these people in the South by like billionaires. Okay, I don't support fundamentalism. I'm just saying that they don't oppose education itself, and you know what, there is a lot of like dark kind of manifestations of fundamentalism and stuff, right? But all I'm saying is, if you want to call us conservative evangelicals, if that's what we are, okay, fine, I'll take that label. But we don't oppose education, we don't oppose modernity. That's not the way this is. That's not what we're doing here. Okay, we oppose certain philosophies, certain philosophical approaches to education, and with good reason. All right, and we have more of a valid reason. He's just saying what he's saying is like, oh, we should just allow the postmodernists and the this and the that and everything, but they're logically ridiculous. That's why we oppose them. They're stupid. Anyway,
you look at the birth of what was happening
hey Terrell, what's up, bro? How are you, my man? God bless.
in churches modernity as a pushback to education. Fundamentalism is a pushback to this, and I've often said that when you look at the birth of what was happening in churches in Germany, especially, and in the end of the 19th century, and in the universities in Germany, you were seeing a lot of higher criticism. You were seeing people look at the Bible and say, like, we have thousands of manuscripts. They contradict each other. How can we use science to get back to the original manuscripts? This is
Science. Science. How can we use science, guys, to give like they're gonna use science to the Bible? It's so utterly dumb. Anyway, like it's not science, man. Or it's I guess you can call it there's scientific reasoning in text criticism. Okay, I'll give them that. But it's more of an art than a science, okay? There's a lot of probabilities and stuff, and they don't know, they can't prove anything that they're doing. They can't test any theory. Okay, it's not like science, like actual science, where you could test the theory with an experiment or something. And we talked about how that's from the Bible as well, from Daniel chapter 1, etc. Right? So, look, these people are just simple. Like, I don't know, man. This is like what this is trying to help people deconstruct and just trying to. He's like a hypocrite, man. He's just a complete hypocrite. He's trying to attack the faith, you know?
even secular scholars now will say this is problematic in today's day and age. This contradict each other. how can we use science to get back to the original manuscripts? This is, even secular scholars now will say this is problematic in today's day and age, but this was what people were thinking about. Or they might say of the historical Jesus that this is the Jesus of faith. We've inherited what's called the Christ of faith, which is a Christ who is mediated by the church. So how can we actually get back to who the historical Jesus would have been, what the historical Jesus would have been teaching as a first century Jew in Palestine? Again,
Yeah, so they have that idea. That's just it's similar to the idea that they think they can reconstruct the original manuscripts of the Bible, right? They try to say that they can reconstruct the historical Jesus. When actually the number one source of information about the historical Jesus is the Bible. And as I was telling you before, they've never disproven anything in the Bible, but they constantly try to claim things are wrong in the Bible, and then the Bible later on they'll find stuff and it'll prove that the Bible was correct. Again and again and again, this keeps happening. This has been happening again and again since like the 19th century. Okay, so don't listen to these people when they say these dumb things.
what the historical Jesus would have been teaching as a first century Jew in Palestine. Again, very problematic now for historians, but this is the type of work they were trying to do.
Oh, hey, Harry Hostage, what's up, bro? God bless. Crafty, we're watching this guy CJ Cornthwaite, who's like, I don't know. He says he used to be like a pastor or something like that. And he got an MDiv like me, and then he got a PhD, and he has another master's in theology. But he's just sitting here trying to tell people why the Bible's wrong and why nobody should believe it and stuff. It's just all these deconstructionist people, wicked.
Too. And as a result, American Christianity pushed back, and we saw like this snowball into the 20th century of this movement that was very anti intellectual, very at its core fighting against that, believing that the very act of asking these types of questions was in itself an assault on Christianity. And at this point in time, there were sort of two different paths I think that Christianity could have taken. The one is the conservative evangelical path where we bury our heads in the sand and push back against modernity and pretend that all of the things we believed in the dark ages should stay true, and that if we can just get back to the Bible as this magic.
No, we're not trying to do that. Obviously not. But we're trying to say that there's certain things that are clearly true. And the thing is, like, you can't say anything to these people. These people just accept evolution as a scientific fact, They accept the age of the earth. They just accept it. And even though we've talked about on this channel about the lack of critical thinking and that kind of reasoning, how that's not scientific at all, how science actually comes from the Bible, and how the scientific revolution was propagated by Christians. We've talked about all those things, right? So I hope you guys will appreciate here that when these people try to act like they have some kind of monopoly on academic thinking and scientific thinking, and the Bible is just some ancient, stupid document from the Middle Ages or whatever he's saying, right? That's just utterly dumb, okay? And the Bible is an ancient document, yeah, not from the Middle Ages, obviously, but from the ancient times, right? But the fact is, nothing has ever been disproven in the Bible. And I don't know, there's other videos I have about the other issues like science and stuff like that. But for this guy, what he's talking about, he's going to try and tell you why Christians who go to school become atheists or whatever.
Magical book that we can just understand, and God has everything in it. It's the final word. Bury our heads in the sand and push back against modernity and pretend that all of the things we believed in the dark ages.
Yeah, again, we're not pushing back against modernity. We're pushing it back against modernism. Modernism, which is different than modernity, right? Modernity is just the period we live in. That's the modern period. Modernism is the idea that there's something morally and also intellectually and otherwise superior about this period that we live in, and that we should therefore reject other ways of thinking or other cultural modes from before. Just wholesale reject everything. Whereas we're saying that no, some of the things from back then are good. Other things, okay, we got new things, we learned new things. Okay, that's good too. And we just take it all in. That's why we don't reject modernity. We like cars. We like to wear glasses or to have like nice. We like to wear like I don't know, whatever. We like modernity. We don't have anything wrong with modernity. We have a problem with modernism. Okay, that's what these people. He's trying to simplify what we say, or trying to straw man us.
should stay true, and that if pretend that all of the things we believed in the ages should stay true, and that if we could
No, of course not. We don't think that. We don't think we should put leeches on our bodies to remove sickness, right? We don't think that. Nobody, no fundamentalist Christians are out here trying to tell people to put leeches on their body when they get sick. We're not talking about any of that stuff. But what we do talk about is the fact that the Bible is true, and that we have a good defense for that, both from the Christian angle and from the scientific angle. But you guys just dismiss everything we say, act like you're superheroes. Well, you're not. You're just a scammer. You're just a false teacher.
we can just get back to the Bible as this magical book that we can just understand, and God has everything in it. It's the final word, and it's the pushback against science. It's the pushback against any kind of
Again, not
political
pushing
question when it
not
comes.
pushing back against science. The Bible is the source of science. The first experiment ever recorded in a text by human beings is in the Bible, Daniel chapter 1. Okay? Scientific thinking emerges from Christianity. We've talked about this in my series on critical thinking. You can check it out. Okay? Um the scientific revolution was propagated by Christians, etc., etc., etc. Christianity is the basis of modern science. It's the basis of modernity. So we don't reject modernity. We are the ones who gave the world modernity. Christianity gave the world modernity. The Bible gave the world modernity. Okay, not atheism, not Greek philosophy. None of that stuff did it. Okay.
Any kind of legal question that the Bible has all the answers. Or we could have taken another approach. We could have taken the approach to say, okay, we recognize that a lot of Christianity was formed
Hey,
in a
what's
very
up?
different
What's
time
up,
than we
Eli?
have now. We recognize
Hey, Faye. How are you? Hello. Hey, what's up, Eli? Glad you're here, brother.
that these people wrote that a lot of taken another approach. We could have taken the approach to say, okay, we recognize that a lot of Christianity was formed in a very different time than we have now. We recognize that these people wrote down these things and they're potentially imperfect, but it was how they understood the world. We recognize that there's a cultural background or a literary background behind the New Testament or the works of the Bible in general, and that we can critically and openly engage with the faith and still kind of stay connected to it, but ask a lot of hard questions. I think those are the two types of visions that you could have had for Christianity at the turn of the 20th century. But in Germany,
Called Jesus Lucifer. What's that one? You put the title in the chat, Crafty. I'll look it up. Oh, you forgot the title though. All right, I'll check it out. I might have put it in my watch later, so I'll check it out.
you had World War II, you had the Holocaust, you had the rise of Hitler, you had all of
What's this guy
these
talking about?
connected to it, but ask a lot of hard questions. I think those are the two types of visions that you could have had for Christianity at the turn of the 20th century. But in Germany, you had World War II, you had the Holocaust, you had the rise of Hitler, you had all of these terrible things, and even biblical studies has its own terrible legacy of how it got caught up in the Nazi world, because like I often say, so much I will say before, like in the late 19th century, a lot of good biblical criticism was coming out of German universities, but then a lot of these people got wrapped up in the Nazi party, or at the very least had to.
What a bunch of nonsense, man. Look, listen, man. There's some good bit of biblical criticism in Germany. All right, whatever. I don't think German deism is that helpful to the Christian faith or whatever. But whatever. It's not as if It's not as if like the Bible contributed to Nazism. That's so utterly dumb. When people try to, but that's what they're trying to do. They play that association game. Like, oh, it's because of they're Christians, and they were reading Martin Luther and all this stuff. Like, shut up. This is just straight up like, what do they call that? It's like well poisoning, or I don't know what do they call that. This is like it's just like a guilt by association type of thing.
Had to like deal with
Oh yeah. I saw it, but I didn't know it was this one you wanted to watch, but I'll check it out. I'll check it out for sure.
was happening there, and it changed the face of history for a lot of different complicated historical reasons. The Christianity that many people inherited, especially in an American context, and I'm not even American, you might think from my accent that I am, Sometimes I drop in the occasional A or a boot, which should tell you I'm Canadian. But even I grew up in the echoes of this type of American evangelicalism, which was very anti intellectual. I've often said, like, I grew up reading apologists and thinking I was doing intellectual work. I never took a science class after grade 10 because I believed I was being persecuted.
So what are apologists are not intellectuals? What is this guy talking about? This guy's like a PhD in biblical studies or something, right? So then he's an intellectual, right? So why is an apologist not an intellectual? What are you talking about? You absolute idiot. You absolute clown. But he's trying to say that if you're an apologist, you're not an intellectual. You're anti-education. Like, what are you talking about? What are you? How dare you? How dare you? There's apologists at universities. They teach their professors. They write books. Like, what are you talking about, man? This guy's just some idiot on a YouTube channel. You have a PhD. How come you don't go work in a university? Why are you on YouTube? You absolute loser. You trying to tell me apologists they're anti-intellectual? What a joke.
Persecuted by being taught evolution. Some of the stuff is ridiculous, but it's the reality of I
Wait,
believed I
what?
was being persecuted by being taught evolution. Some of the stuff is ridiculous.
That is a form of persecution. Now look, I'm not using that in my argument against the theory of evolution. All right, I'm not anti-intellectual in that sense. I can show why evolution is unscientific and dumb. Okay, I can do that. I don't need to do this, but I am. It is a form of persecution that we're forced to go to a school and learn. It's the law of the land that I have to go to a public school and learn this dumb stuff, and they don't teach you any other alternative way of understanding it. They don't teach you like the deeper scientific, like critical thinking about science and stuff. They don't teach you that. So that is a form of persecution. Absolutely, that is. And he's gonna tell you, no, no, no. If you even suggest that, you're some kind of a religious bigot or something. So dumb.
Ridiculous, but it's the reality of how I viewed the world as an evangelical. So how does this come back to seminary, and why do so many people lose their faith in seminary? Well, if you have conservative evangelicalism as a movement that is fundamentally anti-intellectual, fundamentally built on a pushback to
Conservative evangelicalism. That's what we are, or that's what I am. Okay, I'm a conservative evangelical. I am not a fundamentalist. But even fundamentalism, which you might say, there's a lot of fundamentalists that are kind of anti-education or anti-academic or whatever. I guess that's a problem for this guy. Whatever. Okay, that's probably true. I certainly am not. I certainly am not anti-education or anti-intellectual, and neither are most conservative evangelicals. That's ridiculous. It's ridiculous to suggest that conservative evangelicals, like you know how many people, like, look at William Lane Craig. He's a conservative evangelical, right? Or that guy, that English professor who's like a mathematician and he's always talking about John Knox. Is it Knox? Is that his name? Anyway, that guy, that English mathematician guy who will come out and start talking about like the Big Bang and stuff. That guy, or like he'll be like an apologist type of thing. That guy is also a conservative evangelical. Okay. And I guess they're going to say that that's not conservative enough. That once you get conservative to the point where you're denying evolution, now you're just an anti-science bigot. That's what they try to say, these wicked people.
historical critical study of the Bible and a pushback to quote unquote liberal, and I mean small L liberal here, not big L liberal. But you have this movement that was a Christian movement built on being anti-education, being anti-intellectual, and you have people going to seminary, and what are they going to do? They're going to learn Greek and Hebrew, and they're going to look at texts and realize the same things that the German biblical scholars in the late 19th century realized. Holy crap, there are a lot of different manuscripts. We don't know which one's accurate. Holy crap, early Christians read other things as scripture beside the things that are in our New Testament. Holy crap, this Greek word doesn't mean what I think it means, or the writings of Paul that I thought were just really, really clear when I read them in King James Version English are actually much more complicated. Or the figure of...
Oh, you see, now they're trying to play that game. It's just like they just try to make you doubt the simple truth, right? Simple truth. The King James is the Bible. And these guys will try to make you feel like stupid for believing that, but no, it's absolutely 100% true. All right, and they're the ones who don't have a logical basis for their beliefs. They try to tell you that it's not the Bible. There is no perfect Bible. There is, so they're trying to basically make you deny the fundamental truth of what God is. God is perfect. His word is perfect, obviously. So then obviously there must be some perfect Bible out there, and that's what the King James is, and that's why we do it. That's why we read it. But they try to make you doubt those obvious things that you just you just immediately will realize that if you think about it, you know?
Figure of Jesus is more complicated than I thought, or the Gospels seem to have a literary relationship to each other. They're copying each other. Why is that? And how can they be eyewitness accounts if they're copying each other? The problem is when you're looking
Again, they assume that they're copying each other. We don't have to assume that. Why do they assume that? Because they're thinking in a way to deny the Bible's reality. But I told you guys that it's a better theory that they probably just all memorized the same kind of oral tradition. It's a better theory, man, because look, the fact is it was an oral culture back then. People would just memorize lots of literature. They would do that. So of course the authors of the Bible did that, of course. And we're even told Jesus says that that the Spirit will bring all his words to their memory and all that stuff, right? So we know that. So we don't have this. There's a much better theory to think that they just memorized lots of the same stuff and then they went and they wrote and they had the same things in their head. And that's why they don't place it's not like they copied each other in the narrative. They have different narratives. But they have some stories that are exactly the same. That's why these guys try to say they copied each other, but it's just dumb. It's another dumb thing that they say. If they copy each other, why is the narratives all different? Like, you know what I mean? Anyway, so dumb.
looking at religious practice, of evangelical conservative religious practice, it's very easy to stick your head in the sand and pretend that what you're doing is true. It's easy to pretend that the things you believe are true, like the Bible is the inerrant word of.
We're not pretending. Obviously the Bible is true. Obviously it's inerrant. And anyway, that's what it is to be Christian. If you don't want to be Christian, okay, then go be some other religion. Don't tell me that it's stupid for me to believe what I believe. Like, at least prove it. Prove what you're saying, you know? But they just, I don't know, man. I don't know what to say, but this is just, I saw this video and it was just getting me so mad.
Word of
This
God.
is the part I never saw yet. So now it's getting me extra mad. Like, I already saw the first part anyway.
And when you have apologists working really hard to help people stay deluded, to help keep people dedicated to maintaining this lie without actually saying,
no, that's not what apologists do. Okay, I'm sorry if some apologists are. I don't support all the apologists. A lot of them are like they're almost as bad as this guy, you know. But the fact is, that's not what apologists do. They're not trying to help people stay deluded. You're deluded. Why does this guy who's pretending to be an intellectual, right? He's pretending to be an intellectual, and he's just calling me deluded. Just because I have different beliefs, I'm deluded. You know what I'm saying? It's not intellectual. That's not an intellectual way to approach any kind of debate or discussion. If you're gonna approach, okay, we have a discussion, we have a debate. You disagree with me, okay, that's fine. We can now discuss the evidence for whatever, and we can solve who's got the logical argument. Let's do it. Let's go. But you don't come here and say, "Oh, I'm deluded." That's ridiculous. That's insulting. That just shows that he doesn't have an argument. He's just a false teacher. He's just like a hypocrite, man.
saying, like, look, the emperor has no clothes, people in the pews don't ever realize the serious problems with their tradition or with the way they've been taught to view the world. But when you have somebody going to study Christian history or manuscript history, getting background in like critical thinking about texts and looking at manuscripts,
No, it's not critical thinking. They never think about the critical thinking. Like I'm telling you, the critical thinking, the outside the box, the metasystemic critical thinking, as we talked about before, right? This guy's doing the intrasystemic. So they told him in his school that, oh, well, these books of the Bible are all copied from each other. And also all these books are all the manuscripts contradict each other. So we can never have a perfect Bible. So he just believed them. He never, if you want to think critically about it, you got to think, well, wait a minute, is that even true? Let's think about, does this professor telling me the truth? Is there another way to think about this? You know, that would be critical thinking. But he didn't do that. He's calling himself, well, he's telling you that what he did is critical thinking, when all he did was just believe what they told him. That's all he did, you know? Anyway.
Looking at variations, looking at how doctrine emerged, looking at the history of the church. It doesn't take a liberal professor to trick you into questioning the things you believed, because all it takes is looking at the evidence. You just look at the evidence and realize the things you believe are wrong. And you realize that the sad little ways that the apologist gave you to protect your little box of faith fall flat. You realize, as I realized, that my apologist
Let's hear it, bro. This guy spent the 10 minutes of this 18-minute video just talking, just yapping. He hasn't presented one argument based on evidence. Now he's saying, okay, let's look at the evidence. Okay, let's look at the evidence. He just spent the whole 10 minutes just talking bad about us. That's all he did. That's all he did for the whole time. He might sound like kind of intellectual, quote unquote, but if you understand what he's really doing, which a lot of people unfortunately don't, but you guys do, thank God. But this is like what he's really doing is just setting the stage, the well poisoning to make anybody who disagrees with him look like idiots. You know, that's what they do.
Actually took the time to do any serious study. It doesn't take a liberal professor tricking you for you to question faith in seminary. It just takes an honest, open look at the Christian tradition to realize that it is more complicated than anything that I was ever given. And the wild thing is, the thing that just drives me bonkers is that most of these people, instead of going back to their communities and being like, we need to talk because this is more complex than we ever realized. There is space for this in some communities, but not the communities I grew up in. You're just ostracized. You're like, I don't believe the right things anymore, so I have to leave. So the communities keep their head in the sand. They get the leaders that are willing to either
Look, I don't know. I don't know what community he came out of. Okay, I'm probably if he has this kind of view of it now after just going to a seminary, that means they probably weren't teaching him right either. They weren't properly grounding him and giving him a proper understanding of what real critical thinking is. And that's unfortunate because most churches are like that. So I don't know what happened to this guy. Maybe he's just a victim, you know? But the fact is right now he's not a victim. He is a victimizer. He's victimizing his audience. He is talking to them and he's brainwashing them with his deconstructionist false view, you know?
either toe the line or the leaders who don't have proper education or haven't asked the right questions or whatever, they will get leaders who uphold their very oversimplistic, dumb view of the Bible, the world, etc.
Oversimplistic, dumb view of the Bible. This guy's pretending he's some kind of intellectual. So I have a PhD, and your view of the Bible, which is different than mine, is dumb. Is dumb. It's dumb. Well, no, you're dumb. Okay, Mr. Cornthwaite, your view is dumb, and I'm gonna prove it right now. As he begins to talk about his dumb evidence, so-called evidence. Let's see what he is.
Because they self
He's almost guaranteed to be a show. Almost guaranteed. Let's see how many 7,000. Well, maybe not, but probably CJC. He's probably is a show. Probably. I'll let it go for now, though.
self-select those leaders to fit with their biases, and the people who have actually looked at the complexity of the Christian tradition and understood there are problems don't get to stay. They end up usually having to leave, or they end up in more mainline progressive denominations. This is the dirty secret of Christianity. But here's where the chickens are coming home to roost. Is that the right expression? I think it's chickens that come home to roost. Because what you have now is a movement that we are calling deconstruction. And the thing is that the knowledge that used to be locked in seminaries and locked in the ivory tower is
See, now he's admitting it. He's admitting he's a deconstructionist. He's admitting it. I didn't even realize that. Wow, dude, he's fully coming out and saying, I wanted to deconstruct. I'm telling you guys how to deconstruct. Wow, these people are wicked, dude. These deconstructionist people. I'm sorry, man. Imagine it's like crabs in a bucket, you know. They fell into this dark life, into this dark sin of their life, and now they're trying to drag people down into it.
widely available on the internet. It's literally everywhere. So that people can watch a video and understand the synoptic problem, for example, that they probably wouldn't have heard about otherwise. They can watch a video and understand the development.
How, like, I'm sorry. I don't know. I guess, like, maybe when you go to church, they don't teach you what the synoptic problem is. Okay, maybe that's true. But like, if you're gonna get up in the church and to the point where they're like gonna send you to seminary or whatever, you should know what the synoptic problem is by that time. You know, before you go to seminary, you should know what the synoptic problem is. If you don't know what that is, or you never heard of it or whatever, you're just like, you're not ready to go to seminary. You don't know what you're doing. You don't know how to. You're not going to be able to approach the seminary learning with any kind of constructive critical thinking yourself, you know.
Development of theology, or they can understand something about why maybe the specifics of their denomination that their denomination thinks is the hill you have to die on, like a pre-trib or post-trib or some stupid thing like that. They can understand that this is
Pre-trib, post-trib, yeah, that's dumb, but whatever. I don't know. I mean, that's some fundamentalist thing anyway. Whatever.
either not the only way of looking at it or it's outright wrong, and they can start to realize there's a lot more to the world that I was ever taught. You have a generation of kids whose parents and Christian leaders are giving them this box and saying, this is the box.
Dude, this guy has not introduced any evidence for his beliefs yet. Eh? All he's doing is talking about, he's giving his version of what's going on in the church or whatever he thinks, right? Like he thinks he has some kind of monopoly or understanding of the whole fundamentalist movement or whatever. And he's just yapping. He's not proven anything he believes yet, or even proven his own claims about the fundamentalists or anything else. He's not. A lot of those are wrong too. This is just utterly dumb.
You have to live in. And in the meantime, they're going to school and being like, I have friends who are different religions. How do I think about that? I have friends who are gay. How do I think about that? Or I can go on YouTube and Google and realize that the things that I was taught are just really oversimplistic. And I believe that this is the wave of deconstructionism that we are seeing today, because the process that used to happen in seminaries is now happening whole scale in the evangelical fundamentalist churches. And churches are freaking out. They are concerned because all of their young people are being brainwashed, or they're being led astray, or fill in the blanks. They're,
This is just nonsense. This is just Google level skepticism. Like, this is literally like you could just go on Google and get better information than this guy is giving, and it would also be wrong there too. But I'm just saying, this is utterly dumb.
It's an attack on the church by Satan. But really all it is it's this process that used to happen behind closed doors in an ivory tower for seminarians who just went away and didn't say anything about it. And all of a sudden it's happening to your kids in your churches because they can look for themselves at primary evidence. They can look at a manuscript like Codex Sinaiticus, I have it here, where I talk about it, and realize there are different books in the earliest full copy of the Bible we have. The New Testament doesn't even have the same books in it. How do you deal with that? We have a world where people can
How do we deal with that? How do we deal with that? First of all, that's not the earliest. It's not the earliest, okay? I guess he's going to try to say it's the earliest complete one, right? Who cares if it's earliest? Earliest doesn't mean best. But that's the other thing. Like, they try to, like, they just push it through these ideas, right? They just try to tell you, like, of course his conclusion from that is correct, without explaining that there's a much more complicated thing going on here. So he's trying to tell you that we have a simplistic view and that he has the complexified understanding, that he understands all the different lines of evidence or whatever, but he's not. He's actually simplifying the evidence to make it seem like his view is the only possible explanation, but it's not at all.
Can actually ask intelligent questions and get really good answers that just aren't the cookie cutter answers they used to get from a pastor or from an apologist. And what's really pathetic, this is what really gets me as a former evangelical fundamentalist, is that those churches will say you have to leave, or the young people will say I have to leave. I don't believe the right things, therefore I must be an atheist. Therefore I'm, an agnostic. Therefore I can't be in this community anymore. And the stupid thing is that community was always bound to fail anyways, because it's based on an oversimplistic way of looking at the world that's not true. I pointed these out in other.
No, it's not. You're just saying this. You're just saying, once again, you have not proven anything you're saying. You have not even offered any evidence for what you're saying. I guess that thing about Sinaiticus is kind of like evidence. Like, who cares, man? You're just like even the evidence he gave, the Sinaiticus thing, he's just telling you what he concluded from it, as if that's the only possible conclusion. Utterly dumb.
In other videos, but the belief that the Bible is the inerrant word of God, patently false if you're willing to look at the history and realize that it's an impossible belief for the first 200 years of Christianity, 300 years of Christianity. Even later, it's not something that ever made any sense. It's a modern belief. Believing that Jesus.
No, it isn't. He's trying to say inerrancy is a modern belief. Inerrancy is the idea that the Bible is perfectly true, right? When obviously we know Paul wrote that all scripture is God breathed and good for all scripture is God breathed and good for instruction and godliness and doctrine and all those things, right? So no. And even Jesus said, anyway, the Bible literally repeats multiple times that everything it says is true. All thy word is true, Father. This is not some new belief, It's not some new belief. Inerrancy is not a new belief. The actual doctrine, name, and all that stuff, that's kind of new, I guess. But it's always been the belief of the church that the Bible is true.
Jesus Christ died on the cross for my sins to pay a blood sacrifice to a deity who apparently is metaphysical and all-knowing and all-powerful and all-loving, but couldn't actually forgive me for my sins. Who wants to keep having that type of...
Why would he forgive you for your sins? It's like, what are you talking about? Like, it's just like how he can't lie, right? He can't lie because that would be morally wrong, right? It would also be morally wrong to just forgive you for your sins without any payment. That would be morally wrong as well. But if he goes and just sacrifices himself for the sins of the world, well, that would be morally right. That's what he's saying. That is perfect. That makes perfect sense. It's perfectly logical. There's nothing illogical about it. There's nothing irrational about it. Actually, his view is the one that's irrational. Anyway.
Of oversimplistic view of the world when you look at Christian history and realize that this isn't always what people have believed. This is a relatively recent, in terms of Christian history, it's a relatively recent belief. So what's the answer? There's one
What's the relatively recent belief? What is it?
and all powerful and all loving, but couldn't actually forgive blood thing that ever made any sense. It's a modern belief, believing that Jesus Christ died on the cross.
It's a modern belief.
At the history and realize that it's an impossible belief for the first 200 years of Christianity, 300 years of Christianity. Even later, it's not something that ever made any sense. It's a modern belief
What?
anymore. And the stupid thing is that that community was always bound to fail anyways because it's based on an oversimplistic way of looking at the world that's not true. I pointed these out in other videos, but the belief that the Bible is the inerrant word of God, patently false if you're willing to look at the history and realize.
No, again, yeah. So that's sorry. We already talked about that. Inerrancy is clearly true. Even Jesus said, the scripture cannot be broken, right? It's all over through the Bible. It's all throughout the Bible, this view that the scripture cannot be broken. And also, even the early church fathers would say that too. Like Chrysostom. Chrysostom said every syllable is divine. Martin Luther said the Holy Spirit cannot lie. All right, so Augustine, the authors were completely free from error. So it's not some new thing. All right, this is utterly ridiculous. This is just ignorance. This person with this PhD, he doesn't know this obvious fact. Inerrancy is just that's a name we came up with recently, but the idea that the Bible is all true is as old as the Bible. Okay.
Realize that it's an impossible belief for the first 200 years of Christianity, 300 years of Christianity. Even later, it's not something that ever made any sense. It's a modern belief, believing that Jesus Christ died on the cross for my sins to pay a blood sacrifice to a deity who apparently is metaphysical and all-knowing and all-powerful and all-loving, but couldn't actually forgive me for my sins. Who wants to keep having that type of oversimplistic view of the world when you look at Christian history and realize that this isn't always what people have believed? This is a...
No, it's always what people believed. It's always what people... It's in the Bible. And also the church fathers taught it as well. Okay. This is utterly dumb. This is utterly dumb. Why isn't he proving this? Can you prove that inerrancy is a brand new doctrine? Can you prove that? I mean, the name is new. I get it, but the belief isn't new. Can you prove that this view that what you're saying, like what do they call it? What do they call that thing? When it's like substitutionary atonement. He's trying to say substitutionary atonement. That doctrine is just a new thing. It's utterly dumb. This is utterly ridiculous and ignorant, dude.
Is a relatively recent, in terms of Christian history, it's a relatively recent belief. So what's the answer? There's one of two things. Either those young people, just like a lot of seminarians do, are going to disappear and they're going to say, I just want nothing to do with Christianity because it's stupid. Or they're going to self-select out and they're going to not talk to people about it. They're going to go, maybe worst case scenario, they'll go on the internet and complain about it and be mad about it. Or what if we reimagined a Christian community that you could belong to, not because you believe the right things or you have this oversimplistic box of doctrines that we can all nod along to and everybody believes the exact same things, or you recognize that just as it has throughout history, Christianity has always been evolving. The doctrines have always been evolving. The things Christians believe have always been evolving. They're historically conditioned.
Not really. Most of them are quite old. Like I say, most of the major ones, the important ones, some of them have evolved over the time. Like we've talked about soteriology, how that has evolved, and we are kind of like the cutting edge, free grace, right? But even that, it's still this thing that's always been there. It's just been marginalized. Like our view of soteriology has always been in the church, and there is historical evidence of that. But it's just that it's always been kind of put down, and we can see why, because works-based is how people tend to think,
The Bible is a book that has always been evolving, is copied, is historically conditioned. We get to decide which.
The Bible is not evolving. That's utterly ridiculous too. The Bible is like it's been basically almost identical to what it was in the earliest copies, almost identical. And then the few little changes that were made. Okay, well we can see that the King James does a good job of sorting all that out, and now we have a perfect Bible. So that's how we're good. We're good, buddy.
Which books are in and which books are out. And if we recognize that we could reimagine new ways to belong to Christianity, to connect to Christianity without having a checklist of doctrines we expect people to hold, and if we recognize that using our brain, education, exploring could actually be a really fantastic, almost like I'm going to say spiritual practice, but it could be something really, really amazing that young people, old people, anybody gets to do because we have all this wonderful information at our fingertips. I find this every week. I'm on YouTube watching these YouTubers because I'm learning so much about the Bible, about church history, things I didn't know either. We can all learn together. It's an incredible way to explore and experience a tradition, not because we all believe the right things and have checked the right boxes, but because we are actually interested in the tradition. And even in that exploration, a lot of us are experiencing a way of belonging that matters to us and is meaningful to us. And the dirty little secret that Christian communities have, that their leaders go off and get educated and feel like they can't lead anymore, doesn't actually have to be the case. We could actually look to the people who have gone away and kept their mouths shut about the problems they found within the tradition and bring them into the conversation and have a much wider conversation about what Christianity is, what we know to be true, what we know not to be true, and how we want to keep practicing this tradition that is meaningful to us. There will always be people who want to stick their head in the sand. There will always be people who are wired like fundamentalists, even if you don't belong in a fundamentalist church, if you don't go to a fundamentalist church.
Anyway, this is ridiculous. So that was dumb. I will, I don't know, man. I feel like this guy needs to be taken down, so I'm gonna probably talk about him some more. This guy's Canadian too, so what an embarrassment. What an embarrassment.
Okay. I'm studying the Bible in Toronto. 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 Studying the Bible with Mike and Pat. These other YouTubers are just so trash. Hit the thumbs up if you wanna support. Go follow Mike as he follows the Lord. I'm studying the Bible in Toronto. 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 You better watch out, Mike's calling out the shills. If you're not free grace, you need to sit down and chill. We're not hyper grace, you know we keep it real. Eternally secure, you know that we're sealed. We don't back low, we're not workspace heretics. Mike's not in it for the money, trying to get a lick. They out here selling their souls for a couple clicks. Becoming Freemasons so they can't just get rich. I'm studying the Bible in Toronto. 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 Shout out to Mike and Pat. Check out his channel, Toronto Bible Study. Subscribe and like.